Hi there, Scott Hamilton, ROCKFILE, back with another podcast review for your ears. Going to be talking about 1989's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I have probably seen this one the least amount. Well, not counting Crystal Skull, or whatever the name of that one is. I saw this in the theater. I really liked it because I'm a huge fan of Arthurian legend. Anything that involves the Holy Grail and King Arthur and that kind of stuff, I just absolutely eat it up as a kid anyway. And we were coming off the big action movie that was Temple of the Doom. So at the time, this movie came out. It was a big hit, made almost $500 million. They had added Sean Connery. River Phoenix plays a young Indiana Jones. But in my memory, I kind of put it on par with Temple of Doom. And Raiders was always my favorite. And that's kind of where it sat for all these years. So I watched it today. I'm watching them in order. And just from the get-go, you realize how bad Temple of Doom really is. I don't mean to... It's probably somebody's favorite movie, but it's really bad. I mean, of all the Spielberg movies and all the Indiana Jones movies, I can't wait to watch Crystal Skull now because the comparison going from Temple of Doom, which is basically a 2-hour chase movie, there really isn't much else in that film. Then you go to this, and this is very much like the first one. There's a big mystery. They travel the globe. There's intrigue. There's double crosses. I don't think it's still as good as Raiders, but it's light year better than Temple of Doom. George Lucas wrote the story again. Jeffrey Boehm wrote the screenplay. I always thought it was a little slow-paced. It's great now. Looks good in 4K. It's probably the best looking of them so far, but it doesn't have that much to show off the 4K like, especially Raiders of the Lost Ark. The stained glass scene in the middle where they find the clues in the stained glass, that was pretty spectacular in HDR. And some of the stuff towards the end. Other than that, I mean, it looked as good as it's going to look. It was a clean transfer. The sound is probably a hair better than the first two. It sounds a little more modernized. As we discussed in the last two Indiana Jones, the only thing that holds these back from these Atmos mixes from sounding as good as modern movies is just the sound effects and stuff they used. They created everything from scratch like they did in Star Wars. We talked about Ben Burtt, and he's done all the sound design. But what we used for sound effects in movies in 1989 compared to what we use now, they just sound more realistic, and they're bigger than life just about. And so when they blow this up to a Dolby Atmos mix, it's very directional, and it's very enveloping, and it sounds great, but it still doesn't have that depth and that oomph that modern soundtracks do. But this is the best it's ever sounded and the best it's ever looked. I'm very happy with the 4K set. Just, again, shocking as I started to watch this movie, how much better it is than Temple of Doom. So at the beginning, you get a young River Phoenix, and if you don't remember River Phoenix, he was an up-and-coming actor who was the guy at the time. He's the brother of Joaquin Phoenix, who at the time was a bit of a character actor, small little roles. And River was everybody was talking about him, and he passed away suddenly at a very young age. It was very sad when River passed. It was very much like when Heath Ledger passed. It just somebody you felt was robbed. They probably had their best years in front of them. Or Anton Yelchin, a couple of these young actors who just way before their time. So, and Joaquin's had an incredible career. Nobody really talks about River anymore. What do? You bring it up in interviews? I guess not. Very sad. But anyway, he plays young Indiana Jones at the beginning of the movie, and there was a lot of talk at the time that, maybe they would have done something else with him being taken over the role at some point. But that's great. And you kind of get an inkling of where they got the whole Indiana Jones thing from this other guy. So that was all very cute. But it was all so much better than anything that happened at the beginning of Temple of the Doom. And as the movie goes on and it gets deep and they're trying to solve clues and things like that, it's still a lot of chase movie. It's still not as much sleuthing as there was in Raiders of the Lost Ark, but much more in line with that film. Felt much more like it. Almost one too many double crosses, almost one too many times. Like, can't they just, do they always have to lose to the bad guys until the very, very end? But Anyway, I'm looking forward to watching Crystal Skull because that's a movie I've watched like once and just left it there. Maybe twice. Yeah, twice. Once in the theater, once on Blu-ray. So we'll be watching it in 4K soon. But I got to say, all in all, I like the performances. I love Sean Connery in the film. He's amazing, as always. Balding and very much an old guy, and still just he had great chemistry with Harrison Ford. Really enjoyed it this time, more than most any time I think I've ever watched it. Okay. I'm back in. The Temple of Doom had kind of almost taken me out of this, and I was going to say something like, well, Raiders was really the only one I really need in the collection, but I really enjoyed this one, The Last Crusade, and I'm looking forward to reevaluating Crystal Skull, I guess. I'm Scott Hamilton. I'm ROCKFILE. My links are below. By the way, as I mentioned earlier, if you're going to pick up the 4K, they all look better than they did on the Blu-rays. The Blu-rays came out several years ago. It was the first time they'd ever been in high def, and now we get them in 4K. This one, like I said, not as transformative as Raiders, but better than it's ever looked just for a few scenes. The outdoor scenes, the stained glass scenes, the stuff at the end. All in all, I like this one. Not as much as Raiders, but almost. Thanks for checking out this podcast. There'll be another one right behind it. Have a great day.